Okay, folks, these are the supply video notes. I hope that you watch this video or these videos before you attempt to do the assignment that is on Google Classroom. I'm going to do this a little bit differently than the demand video notes because I recorded the demand notes as one whole video. It took really long to upload onto YouTube. So I'm going to do 3 videos. The first video will be the what is supply and the 2 ways to illustrate supply. The second video will be what is a change in quantity supplied and a change in supply. And the third video will be the factors that affect supply and how it shifts or why it shifts to the right or to the left. So hopefully you will watch these 3 little videos before you attempt to do the assignment on Google Classroom. And also on Tuesday, we will have a Zoom meeting or a Google Hangouts, like a Google Meets, that we can go over a little bit of the assignments in case you guys have any questions. So I'll post information on that a little bit later. To start off though, supply is the second side of the market. We talked about markets being a place, any place where buyers and sellers come together to exchange goods and services. And on the buyer side, that's the demand side that we covered last week. We want to focus then this week on the supply side. What is being put up for sale? What is being offered up for sale at each and every price? So the definition of supply is the amount of a product that's offered for sale at all possible prices that will prevail in the market. When you're thinking about supply, I want for you guys to think about supply as if you were an entrepreneur. I know it was easy to relate to demand because you are a consumer in the market. But for the supply side, I don't know very many seniors that own their own business or that are in supplying product to a market. So for you to relate to the supply side of this lesson, I want for you to think of yourself as an entrepreneur. And what are the goals of an entrepreneur? If I own my own business, what would I want to accomplish? And so if you think about it, well, I'd want my business to be successful and I wouldn't want for it to, close down or become bankrupt. So the idea is that on the supply side, think of yourself as an entrepreneur whose main goal is to make a profit. If you think about supply in that sense, then it should make a little bit more sense to you. So there are 2 ways to illustrate supply. And the first way to illustrate supply is like the first way that we illustrated demand, is a supply schedule. So a supply schedule is a table that lists the quantity supplies, the quantity that you supply at each and every price. It's just a listing. We'll say that this is the quantity, the supply schedule for pencils. And so again, it illustrates also what the law of supply states. Which is a little bit opposite than the law of demand. The law of supply says that when prices are high or when prices increase in our market, that the quantity that we supply is going to go up. As an entrepreneur and the idea of profit motive, you will want to put out more on the shelf, the quantity that you supply, the amount that you put on the shelf for sale. You'd want to increase that when people are paying a higher price or when prices are higher in the market. When prices go down or when the price that's prevailing in the market are low prices, then the quantity that we supply is going to go down as well. We'll keep a portion of our inventory in reserve until prices go up again. We're not going to put out as much for sale when prices are low because we're not going to be able to make as much of a profit as if we sold that same item at a higher price. So when prices are low, the quantity that we supply is down. This direct relationship between the 2 variables of price and quantity supplied causes for the supply curve to be an upward sloping line. So let's go back to the supply schedule on pencils. We'll say that, and we're just going to put a few prices that would prevail in the market, and then just again, if the price of pencils were $10 a package, well, I'd put more out on the shelf. So I'd probably supply, like, we'll just say 20 units, hypothetically 20 units. We'll put 20 packages out on the shelf for sale. If prices were $5, well, I'm not going to supply as much. And if prices were $3, maybe I would supply even less. And at $1, I'm only going to put out 5 units of pencils for sale at that price. Remember that when it comes to profit, the supplier is going to sell their goods at a price that they can, that is going to be more than what it costs them to produce. And so at lower prices, If that doesn't cover the cost of production, then I'm not going to put out as much on the shelf for sale. So at higher prices, then we're going to supply more to the market. At lower prices, we're going to supply less to the market. Okay, this is the first way to illustrate supply, is a supply schedule. It's just a table or a listing that lists the quantity that you supply at each price that prevails in the market. So if we, the second way to illustrate that, if we take these points and we plot them on a curve, then the second way to illustrate demand is called a demand. Oh, I'm sorry. To illustrate supply is called a supply curve. If I say demand at any point or quantity demanded, just know that I mean quantity supplied and supply, because yeah. Okay. So supply curve is essentially a graph that has, like on your X and Y axis. I'm actually going to write this down on a separate paper because I'm running out of room. But this supply curve is basically just where on a graph, X and Y axis, where we plot out the points that we had on this supply schedule. So the same way, like I said in economics, to always remember that in this table, it's not like algebra where you have the X and Y axis. In economics, price is always on the y-axis. Some sort of price will always be on the y-axis, and some sort of quantity will always be on the x-axis. So I'm going to just label that QS for quantity supplied, and then I'm going to put my label my market for pencils here, and I'm going to have my prices. So I had $1, $3, $5, $10. I'm just real generically going to create my graph here, and then my quantity was 5, 10, 15, 20, and we'll say 25. Okay, so in any case then, if I plot out these points to illustrate supply, then we should come up with an upward sloping line because of the direct relationship of the law of supply. So at $10, if at $10, then I would supply 20 units of pencils. At $5, I would supply 5 units of pencils. At $3, I would supply 10 units of pencils. And at $1, I would supply 1 unit of pencils. Then we have this upward sloping line that we're going to label S for supply. And so our supply curve is upward sloping specifically because of profit motive. We're going to supply more to the market at a higher price. We're going to supply more to the market at a higher price. And also because of the direct relationship between price and quantity supplied. Okay, so that is the second way to illustrate supply, just upward sloping line real quick like that, and that's going to conclude this first video on what is supply and the 2 ways to illustrate supply. Again, this is the second way that we illustrate supply. Second way that we illustrate supply. Okay.